The massive Imperial ship appeared without warning, its dark metal hull blocking out the stars above New York. Admiral James stood at the United Earth Defense Headquarters window, his weathered hands clasped behind his back. He watched as smaller ships descended through the clouds like falling stars. "They're not even trying to hide," he muttered, turning to face the room full of military leaders. The emergency meeting had been called the moment Earth's deep space sensors detected the Imperial fleet entering the solar system. The main screen flickered to life, showing a tall figure with gray skin and elaborate robes. Lord Grey, as he called himself, spoke in perfect English thanks to their universal translators. "People of Earth," the alien's voice boomed through the speakers. "The Galactic Empire welcomes you into its embrace. Your surrender and integration will be painless if you comply immediately." Admiral James stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "This is Admiral James of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We appreciate your offer, but would prefer to discuss peaceful diplomatic relations instead." The alien's laughter echoed through the room. "Diplomatic relations, with primitives who have barely reached their own moon. You misunderstand, Admiral. This is not a negotiation." The room fell silent. Admiral James looked at the historical display on the wall, showing Earth's past conflicts. World War I, the Cold War, the Water Wars of 2040. Each had taught humanity brutal lessons in survival. "Lord Grey," James said carefully, "I strongly suggest you review our historical records before making demands. We're sending them now." The data streamed to the Imperial ship. Centuries of warfare, innovation born from conflict, and the incredible resilience of human soldiers. Videos of tank battles, dogfights, and naval warfare filled the transmission. Minutes passed as the Empire reviewed the data. Lord Grey's expression remained unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes. Was it amusement, or the first hint of concern? "Impressive for primitives," he finally said. "You fight well among yourselves, but you have never faced the might of the Empire. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. None have resisted successfully." Admiral James walked closer to the screen. "Then let me be clear. Humanity is different. We've spent our entire history fighting ourselves, perfecting the art of war against equals. You don't want us as enemies." The alien's face twisted into what might have been a smile. Brave words from a species that hasn't achieved faster than light travel. "Your weapons are primitive. Your ships are slow. Your defenses are basic." "Perhaps," James agreed, "but we know something you don't." "And what would that be, human?" "How to lose." James let those words hang in the air. "We've lost battles, wars, entire civilizations, but we've learned from every defeat. When's the last time the Empire lost anything?" Lord Grey's expression hardened. "The Empire does not lose." "Exactly." James pointed to the historical footage still playing on a side screen. "Look at those battles. Each defeat taught us something new. We adapted, evolved. Tell me, what happens to an empire that's never tasted failure?" The alien leader waved his hand dismissively. "Enough philosophy. You have one planetary rotation to surrender. After that, we will demonstrate true warfare." The transmission cut off. Admiral James turned to his staff, his face grim but determined. "Send word to all commands. Activate the Mars defense grid. Deploy the Luna squadrons. And most importantly, transmit the Omega warning to all human colonies." "Sir," his aide asked, "which version of the warning?" James looked out the window at the Imperial ships still hovering over the city. They were impressive, their technology far beyond Earth's visible capabilities. But humanity had learned long ago to hide its true strength. "Send them the short version," he ordered. "Just 3 words. Run. From. Us." The aide nodded and transmitted the message. Around the world, hidden military bases began powering up. Beneath the oceans, secret fleets prepared for war. On Mars, automated defense systems awakened from their slumber. The Empire had never lost a war, because they'd never faced an enemy like humanity. They didn't understand that Earth's apparent primitive nature was its greatest deception. Humanity had learned to hide its weapons after nearly destroying itself countless times. As night fell over New York, Admiral James watched the Imperial ships twinkling in the darkness. Tomorrow, they would learn why humanity's warning was so simple, so direct. Run. Because if they didn't, they'd learn what real war was about. The World Council chamber was silent as Admiral James finished his report. 50 leaders from Earth's most powerful nations sat around the circular table, their faces illuminated by the holographic display of the Imperial fleet now positioned near Mars. They have 5,000 ships, James said, pointing to the red dots clustering around the red planet, each one capable of destroying a small city. President Thompson of the North American Alliance leaned forward. "And you're telling me they've never lost a battle?" "Not once." "That's what makes them dangerous," James replied. "They don't know how to handle defeat. They don't know how to adapt." The room erupted in quiet murmurs. General Roberts, a veteran of the resource wars, stood up. His artificial leg made a soft whirring sound as he walked to the center of the room. "Let me tell you about defeat," he said, his voice carrying years of experience. "In 2045, we lost half our forces in the Battle of New Detroit. You know what we did. We learned. We adapted. The next battle, we won." The general activated a new hologram, showing Earth's hidden defenses. "We've spent centuries preparing for war against ourselves. Underground bases, orbital weapons platforms disguised as satellites, the Mars defense grid that everyone thinks is just a mining operation. And the Empire knows nothing about these," asked the Chinese premier. Admiral James shook his head. "They see what they want to see, a primitive species that just reached its moon. They don't know we've had colonies on Mars for 30 years. They don't know about the Jupiter stations or the Titan base." The room's main screen activated, showing Lord Grey's face again. The Imperial ambassador looked smug. "Have you reached a decision?" he asked. "Your time is running out." President Thompson stood. "We have. Would you like to hear a story first, Lord Grey?" The alien's expression showed mild amusement. "A story? How primitive." In 1939, a powerful empire thought they could easily defeat a small island nation. Thompson continued. "They attacked without warning. Do you know what happened? Your primitive wars don't interest me. That nation rebuilt from ashes. They adapted, evolved, and eventually they became one of the strongest powers on Earth." Thompson's eyes narrowed. "That's humanity's greatest strength. We learn from our defeats." Lord Grey laughed. "Charming. But the Empire has technology you can't imagine." "Maybe," Admiral James cut in. "But let me share something about human warfare. In our last global conflict, we developed weapons that could destroy entire cities. Then we made them better, stronger, and then we hid them away because we scared ourselves with our own capacity for destruction." The alien's smile faltered slightly. "Are you threatening the Empire?" "No," James replied. "We're warning you. Every weapon we've created, every tactic we've developed, was tested against ourselves. Do you understand what that means? We know our weaknesses because they're the same weaknesses we've exploited in each other for centuries." The World Council members stood one by one. General Roberts stepped forward. "We've fought in jungles, deserts, oceans, and mountains," he said. "We've fought with sticks, stones, guns, and antimatter weapons. Each time we found a new way to win, we also found a new way to lose. And we learned from both." Lord Grey's amusement had completely vanished. "You have 1 hour left to surrender." The transmission cut off. Admiral James turned to the Council. "They're positioning their fleet for an attack on Mars. They think it's defenseless." "Should we show them the grid?" General Roberts asked. "No," James replied. "Let them come. Let them learn why we warned them to run." He pressed a button, and a new hologram appeared, showing Earth's true military strength. Hidden fleets emerged from underground bases. Orbital platforms revealed their weapon systems. The Mars defense grid hummed to life. "Send one last message to the Empire," President Thompson ordered. Admiral James nodded, typing 3 simple words: "You were warned." As the message transmitted, humanity's real weapons of war awakened. Not the visible ships or guns, but the true strength that had kept humanity alive through countless conflicts. The ability to adapt, to improvise, and to never, ever give up. The Empire was about to learn why they should have run when they had the chance. Commander Wilson watched from his underground base as the Imperial ships entered Mars' atmosphere. Their massive hulls cast dark shadows across the red desert, stirring up storms of rust-colored dust. Through his command center screens, he counted 30 transport ships, each carrying hundreds of troops. Behind them, 5 warships provided cover. "They really think we're primitive," he said to his officers. "They're not even scanning for underground facilities." The Imperial ships landed near what looked like an abandoned mining complex. In reality, it was the heart of the Mars defense grid, its simple exterior hiding layers of advanced weapons and sensors. "Let them get comfortable," Wilson ordered. "Wait until they're fully deployed." Hours passed as the Imperial forces set up their base. Their confidence was clear in how they worked. No defensive positions, no scout units, no security patrols. They treated this like a simple occupation of an empty world. Wilson smiled. Time to teach them their first lesson in human warfare. Activate the dust units. Across the Martian surface, thousands of tiny robots, each no bigger than a grain of sand, came to life. They had been hiding in the natural dust of Mars for years, waiting. Now they swarmed toward the Imperial base, carried by the planet's winds. "They're starting to have equipment failures," reported Lieutenant Reed. "Their shields are trying to block the dust, but our nanites are getting through." Wilson nodded. This was humanity's first real advantage. The Empire's technology was too obvious, too dependent on brute force. They never considered that a primitive species would think to weaponize dust itself. "Phase 2, Wilson commanded. "Wake up the underground units." Deep beneath the Martian surface, metal doors opened. Hundreds of small, automated tanks emerged from hidden tunnels, their designs based on decades of Earth warfare. They were simple, rugged, and completely expendable. The Imperial forces never saw them coming. The first wave of tanks burst from the ground directly under their ships, firing specially designed weapons that targeted the aliens' landing gear. 3 transport ships toppled immediately, their crews caught completely off guard. "They're responding," Reed announced. "Enemy troops are deploying. But their equipment is malfunctioning. The nanites have infected their systems." Wilson watched as chaos erupted across the Imperial base. Their advanced weapons flickered and failed, corrupted by microscopic machines. Their communications were filled with static as the dust infiltrated their systems. And still, they had no idea where the real attack was coming from. "Launch the decoys," Wilson ordered. Hundreds of holographic tanks appeared across the battlefield, mixed in with the real ones. The Imperial forces fired at everything they saw, wasting their energy weapons on false targets, while real tanks struck from unexpected angles. "Sir," Reed called out, "they're calling for reinforcements. 3 warships are entering the atmosphere." Wilson pressed a button, activating his direct link to Admiral James on Earth. They took the bait. "The warships are in position." "Understood," James replied, activating the orbital defense grid. The sky above Mars lit up as hidden weapons platforms, disguised as scientific satellites, revealed their true purpose. Concentrated energy beams struck the Imperial warships from multiple angles. Their shields, already weakened by the nanite dust, couldn't handle the assault. 2 warships exploded in the thin Martian atmosphere. The third managed to retreat, its hull scared and burning. On the ground, the Imperial forces were in full retreat. They had never faced an enemy that fought like this, invisible, unpredictable, using the very environment as a weapon. Their training had no protocols for an enemy that refused to fight according to their rules. "Should we pursue?" Reed asked. Wilson shook his head. "No. Let them run. Let them tell their leaders what happened here." He looked at the battlefield displays, showing the retreating Imperial forces. This was just a taste of what humanity can do. They still haven't seen our real weapons. As the remaining Imperial ships flood Mars' orbit, Wilson sent a short message to Earth. First blood drawn. They learned nothing. Admiral James' reply was equally brief. Then we'll have to teach them harder lessons. The battle for Mars was over, but Wilson knew this was just the beginning. The Empire had lost its first battle in history, and their response would be brutal. But humanity was ready. They had spent centuries preparing for this kind of war, even if they hadn't known who they were preparing to fight. The real war was about to begin. The Empire's main fleet arrived 3 days after their defeat on Mars. 10,000 warships filled Earth's sensors, their massive forms blocking out entire star clusters. Admiral James watched from the Lunar Command Center as they approached, their formation perfect and unchanging. "Still using the same old tactics," he said to his staff. "No screening elements, no scouts, no variation. Just brute force." The main screen lit up with Lord Grey's face. The Imperial ambassador's usual smugness was replaced with cold anger. "Your resistance ends today. The Empire's main fleet has arrived." "I can see that," James replied calmly. "Still flying in standard formation. I notice. You'd think after Mars, you'd try something new." "Enough." Lord Grey's voice boomed. "You used tricks and deception on Mars. Against our main fleet, your primitive weapons will mean nothing." James smiled. "You still think our visible weapons are our real strength. Activate Operation Hornet's Nest." Across the solar system, humanity's true defense grid came to life. Millions of tiny drones, each no bigger than a coffee cup, emerged from their hiding places in the asteroid belt. They had been there for years, disguised as space debris, waiting for this moment. The drone swarms moved like schools of fish, their patterns shifting and flowing in ways that Imperial targeting systems couldn't predict. They carried no weapons. They were the weapons, each one programmed to find weak points in enemy ships and exploit them. "First wave, engage," James ordered. The drones struck the Imperial fleet's rear ships first. They didn't try to destroy the massive warships. Instead, they targeted sensors, communication arrays, and external weapon systems. Thousands of tiny impacts, each precisely calculated for maximum effect. Lord Grey's image flickered as the Imperial fleet's communication network began to fail. "What trickery is this? Fight us properly." "We are," James replied. "This is how humans wage war. We find weaknesses. We exploit them. We adapt." The Imperial fleet tried to respond, their energy weapons firing in beautiful but predictable patterns. The drone swarms simply flowed around the attacks like water around rocks, continuing their systematic dismantling of the fleet's external systems. "Second wave, commence," James commanded. From Earth's dark side, hundreds of small fighter ships appeared. They were piloted by AIs trained on centuries of human combat data, capable of making decisions faster than any living pilot. The fighters darted between the Imperial ships, using their own massive size against them. "Their ships can't target anything this small moving this fast," reported Captain Lee from the fighter control room. "The AIs are predicting their firing patterns with 99% accuracy." The Imperial fleet began to break formation for the first time. Some ships clustered together for protection, while others tried to retreat. Their perfect military order was crumbling in the face of an enemy that refused to fight according to their rules. "You dare use thinking machines against us?" Lord Grey's voice was filled with disgust. "This is not proper warfare." "Proper warfare?" James laughed. "There's no such thing. You fight with whatever works." "Third wave, deploy." The lunar surface cracked open as hidden silos revealed themselves. But instead of missiles, they launched clouds of what looked like metallic fog. The nanite clouds drifted toward the Imperial fleet, each microscopic robot programmed to infiltrate and disrupt enemy systems. Fall back. Lord Grey ordered his fleet. Regroup at the outer system. James watched as the mighty Imperial fleet retreated, their perfect formation completely shattered. Nearly a third of their ships had been effectively neutralized, not through destruction, but through the careful disabling of key systems. Send the follow-up message, he ordered. On every Imperial ship's command screen, the same text appeared. This was just our automated defense system. Would you like to see how we fight when we really try? The Imperial fleet's retreat turned into a rout. Their mighty warships fled in disorder, their crews facing something they had never experienced before, the terror of fighting an enemy they couldn't understand or predict. Admiral James turned to his staff. They'll be back. And next time, they'll be angry. That's when we'll show them what humanity is really capable of. The solar system grew quiet again as the Imperial fleet disappeared into deep space. But in that silence, humanity prepared for what they knew was coming. The real war was about to begin, and they would be ready. Captain Miller floated silently in the void of space, his advanced stealth suit making him virtually invisible against the star-filled background. 5 other team members drifted nearby, approaching the Imperial command ship like ghosts. Remember, he whispered through the secure comm, we're not here to destroy. We're here to send a message. The massive Imperial vessel hung in space, its crew still struggling to repair the damage from the drone swarm attack. They never noticed the 6 humans carefully landing on their hull, using tools that looked more like simple mechanical clamps than advanced space gear. Simple works best, Miller thought, remembering his training. While the Empire relied on energy shields and force fields, humanity had perfected the art of physical infiltration. Inside the Earth Defense Command, Admiral James watched the operation through the team's helmet cameras. Phase 1 is complete, he announced to the World Council. Now we show them why underestimating humans was their biggest mistake. Miller's team cut through the Imperial ship's hull using tools that looked like ordinary blowtorches, but were actually focused plasma beams developed from Earth's fusion research. The Empire's internal sensors didn't detect them. They were looking for energy weapons and explosions, not simple heat and pressure. We're in, Miller reported. Beginning Phase 2. The team split up, moving through the ship's maintenance tunnels. Each carried a small device that looked like an old Earth smartphone. These were actually the most advanced computer viruses humanity had ever created, designed to infect and control Imperial technology. First target located, reported Team 2. Engineering Control Room. Second target acquired. Team 3 added. Main Computer Hub. Miller reached his target, the ship's bridge access tunnel. Through a small vent, he could see Lord Grey himself, arguing with his commanders. How can primitives be defeating us? The Imperial leader demanded. Where are their proper warships? Their invasion fleets. Miller smiled inside his helmet as he planted his device. The Empire still didn't understand. They were fighting the last war, using tactics that worked against enemies like themselves. But humanity had spent centuries learning to fight differently. All devices planted, Miller reported. Beginning activation sequence. Across the Imperial command ship, small lights began blinking on the planted devices. They connected to each other, forming a network that spread through the ship's systems like a digital virus. What's happening? Lord Grey's voice carried through the vent as his control screens began showing Earth military symbols. Admiral James' face appeared on every screen in the Imperial ship. This is how humans wage war. His voice echoed through every speaker. We don't need massive fleets. We don't need planet-destroying weapons. We just need to be smarter than you. The Imperial ship's systems began shutting down one by one. Not destroyed, but controlled. Miller's team had turned their flagship into a puppet. Impossible, Lord Grey shouted. We are the Empire. We cannot be defeated by primitives. You already have been, James replied. Right now, similar teams are taking control of 30 other command ships in your fleet. Your mighty empire never saw them coming because you were too busy looking for big ships and heavy weapons. Miller and his team were already retreating, their mission accomplished. Behind them, they left not destruction, but something far more devastating to the Empire, proof of their vulnerability. Through the emergency channels, reports flooded in from other Imperial ships. Human teams had struck simultaneously across their fleet, using simple tools and clever tactics to defeat the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. "Send the signal," Admiral James ordered. Every screen on every Imperial ship suddenly showed the same message. This was just 6 humans per ship. Imagine what we could do with our whole military. The Imperial fleet hung motionless in space, their mighty weapons useless against an enemy that had already slipped through their defenses. In the command ship, Lord Grey watched helplessly as human code rewrote his ship's operating systems. They had warned the Empire to run. Now they had proven why that warning should have been heeded. For the first time in its long history, the Empire faced an enemy it couldn't defeat through sheer force, and this was only the beginning. Miller's team returned to their stealth ship, leaving behind an empire that was finally learning what real fear felt like. The war's turning point had arrived, not with a massive battle, but with the quiet insertion of 6 humans who had just changed everything. The Imperial War Council chamber was in chaos. 14 high commanders argued loudly around the massive black table, their voices echoing off the ornate walls. Lord Grey stood silent, watching the Empire's finest military minds fall apart. "How did they get past our shields?" one commander demanded. "Why can't we track their ships?" another shouted. "Where are they hiding their main fleet?" The questions kept coming, but Lord Grey had stopped trying to answer them. On the main screen, footage from their defeats played in a loop. Mars, the drone swarms, the infiltration of their command ships. Each loss was another crack in the Empire's undefeated legacy. "My lords," a junior officer interrupted, rushing into the chamber. "We've decrypted more of Earth's historical records. You need to see this." The screen changed to show images from Earth's past wars. Cities reduced to ash by nuclear fire. Armies of millions clashing across continents. Weapons that could destroy whole nations. This, Lord Grey's voice trembled slightly. This was how they fought themselves. "Yes, my lord. And there's more." The officer pressed another button. "These are classified files from something they called the Cold War." The council watched in stunned silence as they learned about humanity's nuclear arsenals. Thousands of weapons, each capable of destroying cities, all pointed at their own people. For decades, humans had lived under the threat of their own extinction. "They're insane," one commander whispered. "No," Lord Grey replied, finally understanding. "They're survivors. Everything they've used against us. The drones, the infiltration teams, the computer viruses. These are gentle compared to what they've used on themselves." The screen showed more footage. Biological weapons, chemical warfare, orbital strike platforms disguised as weather satellites. Humanity had developed these weapons, tested them, and then chosen not to use them. Not because they couldn't, but because they had scared themselves with their own capacity for destruction. "My lords," the officer continued, "we've also discovered why we can't find their main fleet. They don't have one." "Impossible." A commander slammed his fist on the table. "They must have warships hidden somewhere." "No," Lord Grey said quietly. "We've been fighting the last war. They're fighting the next one. Every weapon we've seen. The nanites, the drones, the AI fighters. They're all automated. Disposable. Their real weapons are their minds. Their creativity. Their willingness to try new tactics." The chamber fell silent as a new transmission appeared on the screen. Admiral James looked calm, almost relaxed. "Have you figured it out yet?" the human asked. Lord Grey stepped forward. "You've been holding back." "Of course we have." James smiled. Everything we've used against you so far has been defensive, non-lethal where possible. We didn't want to destroy the Empire. We just wanted you to understand why we warned you to run." "Your warning," Lord Grey's voice was bitter. "We thought it was primitive bravado." "No, it was mercy." James' expression turned serious. "We've spent thousands of years learning every possible way to destroy ourselves. Do you really want to see what happens when we turn all that knowledge outward? When we stop holding back?" The War Council looked at each other. Their mighty empire, undefeated for 10,000 years, had never faced an enemy like this, an enemy that had nearly destroyed itself countless times, learning and adapting from each near extinction. The Empire. Lord Grey paused, the words feeling foreign in his mouth, would like to discuss terms for peace. James nodded. "A wise choice. We'll send our conditions shortly." The transmission ended. The War Council chamber remained silent. On the screen, Earth's historical footage continued playing, showing scene after scene of humanity's capacity for both destruction and survival. They had ignored humanity's warning to run. Now, they could only hope they hadn't waited too long to listen. 1 year after the Empire's failed invasion of Earth, Admiral James stood on the observation deck of humanity's first official galactic embassy. The massive structure floated in neutral space between Earth and Imperial territory, its design a perfect blend of human ingenuity and Imperial technology. "Quite a view, isn't it?" he said to Commander Wilson, who had just arrived from Mars. Below them, ships from a dozen alien species moved through space, their patterns careful and respectful of each other's territories. "Hard to believe this all started with them demanding our surrender," Wilson replied, watching an Imperial diplomatic vessel dock at the station. "Now they're asking for our help modernizing their military." James smiled. The peace terms had been simple but revolutionary. Earth would share its defensive technology with the Empire, but only if the Empire agreed to reform its approach to governing. No more demands for immediate surrender. No more treating other species as primitives. The main door slid open, and Lord Grey entered. The Imperial ambassador looked different now. His ornate robes replaced by simpler clothing, his posture less rigid. A year of learning from humans had changed him. "The first joint training exercise was a success," he announced. "Though I must admit, watching Imperial soldiers learn guerrilla warfare techniques is unusual." "Change is always unusual," James replied, "but necessary. Speaking of which, how are the other species responding to the new approach?" Lord Grey activated a holographic display showing the known galaxy. Dozens of points of light represented different civilizations, many of which had been under Imperial rule. "They're cautiously optimistic," he said. "Your idea of a galactic council, where all species have equal representation, is radical by Imperial standards. But after seeing what a primitive species did to our fleet, they're willing to listen." Wilson chuckled. Amazing what a little humility can accomplish. The station's alert system chimed softly. A new ship was approaching. This one from a species that neither humans nor the Empire had encountered before. Its design was unusual, organic-looking rather than mechanical. "First contact protocols engaging," the station's AI announced, using updated human Imperial guidelines. James watched as the automated systems sent out peaceful greetings in multiple formats. No demands for surrender. No assumptions of superiority. Just an open hand of friendship backed by the clear strength to defend it if necessary. "They're responding," Lord Grey reported, reading the incoming transmission. "They say they've heard of Earth. Apparently, our little conflict made quite an impression on the galaxy." "What do they know about us?" Wilson asked. "They say, Earth is the world that taught the Empire to run." Lord Grey smiled slightly. "Your reputation precedes you." James walked to the window, watching as the new alien ship carefully approached the station. "We never wanted to be known for our warfare," he said quietly. "But perhaps being known as the species that stopped the Empire's endless expansion isn't so bad." "You did more than that," Lord Grey admitted. You taught us something we had forgotten in 10,000 years of victory. There's always more to learn, always room to improve. The station hummed with activity as preparations were made to welcome the new species. Human diplomats worked alongside imperial officials, their former enmity replaced by mutual respect. "Send them our standard greeting package," James ordered, including the complete history of the Earth Empire conflict. "As a warning?" Lord Grey asked. "As a lesson," James corrected. "The same lesson you learned. That appearances can be deceiving. That primitive doesn't mean weak. And most importantly," he turned to face the Imperial ambassador, "that when someone warns you to run, sometimes you should listen." The new alien ship docked successfully, its crew about to join the growing community of species learning to work together. Earth had taken its place among the stars not through conquest or submission, but by teaching the galaxy's oldest empire a simple truth. True strength lies not in never facing defeat, but in learning from every challenge. On the station's main screen, humanity's new motto displayed in a dozen alien languages. We warned them to run. Now we teach them to learn. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what humanity had hoped for.